Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be discussing one of the most important contributions to literature in the year of our Lord 2023, and that is Jason Derulo's new memoir, Sing Your Name Out Loud, 15 Rules for Living Your Dream. So I read this book about a week ago and it has just been rattling around in my brain ever since, so I need to discuss it because I also haven't figured out what I'm going to write this book and I need an outlet to talk about it. So I have attempted to organize this review a little bit. We're going to be going through 3 aspects of this book: personal life, career, and the advice that Jason Derulo gives. So let's just go ahead and get started. All right, for the personal section, I do think that this is a good memoir. I think that it is effectively told. It is broken up into 15 parts for each of the 15 rules, but then each of them starts with a little anecdote from his life. It's not I was born and then I went to school and then I did this and then I did this. It jumps around depending on what he is trying to tell you, which is my preferred way of consuming a memoir. I also did this via audiobook, so I'm not going to have direct quotes to pull out, but Jason Derulo does narrate it, and I think that he does an excellent job. He laughs at himself and puts a lot of extra personality into this book. I'm starting with the nice stuff, don't worry, it is not a perfect book at all. The other thing that he addresses right off top is because Sing Your Name Out Loud, because Jason Derulo is so iconic but goofy, and he was saying that he does it because it's emblematic of a tag that is more commonly used in rap and hip-hop, and that's just something that he carried over. He sang it a bunch of ways until he found one that sounded good and just decided to stick with it, and it's goofy but brilliant. But the primary thing that this book is obsessed with is the grind. Jason Derulo was in elementary school on the grind, just every day, songwriting, trying to get onto the track team, onto the basketball team, talking about how little he ate, how little he slept, and trying to frame these as a good thing. He also talks about trying to get into shape as a kid, and he and his brothers and cousins would wrap themselves in saran wrap and go for a jog in the Florida heat, which is, I don't think it needs saying, don't do that. He sort of presents it as just a fun little quirk. Don't do that. He talks about how he was constantly going out for singing competitions and auditions. He auditioned for American Idol but didn't get it. That was kind of interesting. He also talks quite a bit about sports. So he tried out for the track team, not because he was particularly passionate about track, but because there were cute girls that he could interact with, and so that became his sole mission. It's very much like it is all the grind set. You just got to put your mind to something and then destroy your life and body in order to get it. And he also talks about basketball. Apparently this performing arts school that he went to was also nationally recognized. They were very good at basketball. I don't know anything about sports. So he was also on that team and is convinced that if he had stuck with it, he easily would have gotten pro. Jason Derulo believes in himself a lot, a lot. I'm not saying it's unwarranted. He has accomplished some cool things. It's just a lot of this book is sort of just him hyping himself up. This is also the part where he sort of talks about how you just have to choose to be successful, and it doesn't matter what you're passionate about, you just kind of have to pick a thing. But then in the same breath, he also says that it is very important to pick something that you are passionate about in order to maintain your level of intensity that is required. So there are quite a few contradictions, shall we say, in this book that I don't think Jason Derulo fully recognizes. I can't call him Jason. Mr. Derulo? But in general, the memoir is good. It covers a wide variety of things. They're all very interesting story. He's gotten to meet some very interesting people, and I really enjoyed that part of it. But let's talk about career stuff next. Number 1. What is the defining moment of Jason Derulo's career, other than coming up with Jason Derulo? It is Cats, 2019 Cats, in which Jason Derulo played Rum Tum Tugger, and is arguably the best part of that movie. It is never mentioned in this book. It is the one thing that I care about more than anything else Jason Derulo ever does, and he never mentions it, which I think is actually very telling. He spends a long time talking about TikTok, for instance, and that is worth taking up an entire chapter, but being in a major motion picture where people actually liked you. No one liked the movie, but if anyone had something positive to say, it was about Jason Derulo, and we're just not going to talk about it. Like, it's such a fascinating film experience. I'm obsessed with Cats 2019, and we're just never gonna mention it. I should give the book 1 star right there, because also Cats is all about characters singing their own name. That is Jason Derulo. Not a fan of the Cats erasure, but the rest of his career is whatever. We learned very quickly that Jason Derulo is primarily a songwriter, which I actually didn't know, and it is quite interesting. He's responsible for a couple of major songs around the 2009 timeframe. Replay is one that definitely surprised me, but I do think that he's an interesting songwriter. It's very hard to tell, because this book made me go into the whole back catalog of Jason Derulo, and it's like, are they good songs? Or like, is what a good song is in 2009 a very different thing? Like, obviously it is, and I think maybe he can just sort of hit on the zeitgeist of the moment, but also like, Talk Dirty has that great hook in it that will get stuck in your head for days, that like, it's just permanently in my head now. And then we get into Jason Derulo's big philosophy, which he says he doesn't care about awards, which I do think is fair. There's a bit of interesting discussion about how awards are given out and what they're trying to accomplish, and generally I agree with what he's saying. But his goal is not artistic integrity, like you might think. It's just numbers. That's the only thing the man cares about, and hammers that home every other page in this book. He talks about how he decided to be a pop musician and not an R&B musician because pop music is more popular. It's literally the name of it. He says arguably he's better at R&B, but he wanted the numbers. He's written songs that he's like really passionate about, but then he plays them for people and they flop, and he's like, well, I guess I just won't. And it's kind of sad. It's a very dystopian feeling that you get of this man putting in all of this effort and having very little self-confidence, it feels like. Like, he's driven by the market. I don't think that Jason Derulo is a sociopath, but it is sort of like sociopathic behavior of like, I am going to let the data dictate what I should say and how I should act and what I should do. And he makes a big deal of those numbers. He talks about the billions of views that he's gotten across platforms, the billions of radio plays. He also repeatedly talks about how he's had a career over 3 decades, but he actually means that he had a hit song in 2009 and a hit song in 2020. And it's like, 11 years and 3 decades are not the same thing. I get it. Hype yourself up. When you're so focused on the numbers, you're already kind of fudging the numbers for us. He was on tour with Lady Gaga opening for her after he had only had 2 songs released, and he starts talking about how he got inspired by Whitney and her famous cover of And I Will Always Love You, which is originally a Dolly Parton song. And I was like, okay, I'm seeing what you're doing. You don't have a full set list, so we're gonna bump it up with some covers inspired by Whitney. But that was not what he meant. He was saying that Whitney was just so incredible that you could listen to her sing the phone book, so he decided to do all of his songs twice in his set. Sometimes 3 times. He would do like the regular version and an acoustic version, maybe a remix version. I mean, it's not his fault that he got hired to go on a tour when he only had 2 songs, but there's gotta be something better, right? If that was me, no, it makes me feel bad. He also talks a lot about TikTok in this. He is very grateful for TikTok and is very much a numbers game. That's something he credits a lot of his success on, and his longevity, which is sort of a double-edged sword, because I do think that Jason Derulo is one of the people who like actually gets TikTok and is using it properly and is not just doing it for promotion and actually looks like he wants to be there. But then again, because it's all a numbers game, does he want to be there because he genuinely wants to be there, or because he has figured out what will be successful, looks at all the trending things? Like, yes, these are all things that we do, but when he says it, it just kind of sounds sad. Very rarely does he say, I did this thing just for me and it hit and I was very happy. You know, he talks about how his dog was in the background of one, and he's like, then I dedicated a whole month to just doing stuff with my dog. Which, I don't know, he's a very confusing man. It's interesting too, because almost all of the specific TikToks that he mentioned were done within the first 2 or 3 months of the pandemic. And so I am curious how he feels like the longevity of it is. He talks a lot about the numbers. He gains stupid numbers of subscribers in a day, but he's certainly tapped into something, and I'm very happy for him. The last section that we're going to talk about is the advice that he gives. A lot of this very explicit advice, a lot of it like anecdotes where he says, I'm not actually telling you to do this, but it's sort of implied that I am successful and I did this. So it's sort of inherently advice, especially if you printed it in a book called 15 Rules for Living Your Dream. The man loves manifesting. He just sort of believes that everything can be manifested. He obviously is a very hard worker, arguably too hard sometimes, but he pushes for manifesting a lot in this book. He also talks a lot about how these are the things that he does, but like you don't necessarily have to do that. It's perfectly fine to live a normal life, but he says it with this tone of like, I am exceptional, but if you want to be like a boring basic bitch, like that's fine for you to do, but like he has very little consideration for outside influences too. One of the things he says, I think in the first chapter, is that there are only 7 black billionaires. There are 7 black billionaires in America and he wants to be the 8th. And there's no like examination of the racial connotations of why there are so many. I hate saying only 7 black billionaires because there shouldn't be billionaires. That's stupid. But there's no thought paid to the racial component of that or like the financial component of like, should there actually be billionaires? And then he says something about how there is enough success for everyone out there. And he punctuates it by saying, I genuinely believe that there is enough room for everyone to get their dreams, which is just not true. You can't be the #1 pop star in the world and share that with everyone who wants to be a pop star. I wanted to be a pop star when I was like 8 years old. Didn't happen, but maybe if I had had that grind set as a preteen. Yeah, so he says there's enough success for everyone, but then later also says you have to keep pushing yourself because you are constantly competing with a younger version of yourself. There's always going to be some new up-and-comer right behind you that's trying to push you out. So which one is it? Is there enough success for everybody, or do you constantly have to be watching your back for these young hooligans that are going to try to take your spot? I generally have a gripe with self-helpy stuff anyway, but it's just the direct contradiction of that. It's just like getting your hopes up, but also making it your fault if you don't succeed. Here's one piece of advice that I did actually like, where he was talking about how he would go out to radio stations and play the people who run a radio station. They probably have a name. He would play them new songs that he was thinking about releasing. And he said, never just show someone one song because they'll just sort of like say it was good or whatever. He always said, take in 2 songs and ask them to compare them, because then even if they aren't comparing directly between things, they'll say like, I enjoyed the hook more on this, I thought that the production was better on this. They will get more specific and people will feel more open to actually expressing how they feel. And I do think that that is true and is something I will try to remember in my own life. But let's get back to the bad advice. The big one where he says he moved out to LA to start his first job and he rented an apartment that he couldn't afford as a motivator to make more money. And he immediately says, I don't recommend that you do this, but he's sort of inherently recommending that you do this. Let me just say, don't do this. In this economy, absolutely not. And then he also has some very specific stuff about diet and exercise, which was really, really unhealthy. Basically, anytime someone is trying to recommend diet to you, be wary of it. But he was talking about how he works out 3 times a day, and that's just what he needs in order to feel his best, which again has a connotation of like, if you want to live a normal life and only work out once a day, then like that's fine for you. But us at the S tier elite level, we actually care about stuff. It feels super gross. And he also talks about how he broke his neck at one point and it was really bad and he was in a lot of pain forever because he wanted to do more backflips. He just can't kind of like fit the pieces together. He can't like conceptualize a world where there are struggles for like normal people. This is so not an advice book for the average person. This is so much like hustle grind set culture that I don't vibe with. And then he also talks a bit about his diet. He talks about when he was poor, he could only afford like to eat apples or just bananas, and doesn't present that as a good thing, but presents it as like I was able to get through this. Which if your body can't just run on apples, I think that that's okay. He also said he's tried every diet under the sun, intermittent fasting, he's partially vegan sometimes, and it has this sad, desperate quality to it that I feel so mean saying, but it's just this discomfort with who he genuinely is as a person and needs all of these external validations in order to feel good about himself, and it just sort of reads as very hollow and very like corporate machine. Of course, this is just a narrow view of him, especially in a book that is specifically written as an advice book. It's going to skew that way, which maybe isn't how he is in his personal life, although he sure gives the impression that there is no such thing as a personal life. It's all business. Like, you should only be home to sleep every other hour of the day. You've got to be hustling. I think that this book does contain some good moments and some interesting insight into his life and nuggets of good advice, but it is buried in that toxic mindset of you are only what you can produce and men need to go to therapy. So that's what I thought of the Jason Derulo book. I think that I would recommend it. Like, there's definitely lots of stuff that I left out and lots of context, and the format of the book is very differently. So if you're interested in hearing about Jason Derulo, he's a very interesting man. He's had a very interesting career. So yeah, go pick this up for yourself, especially the audiobook is narrated by him, and I think it's only like 6 hours, so I recommend it. That being said, what do I want to rate it? I was hoping that just sort of spewing nonsense for 30 minutes would give me some sort of clarity, but I think that this is something that I did enjoy reading. Even if I didn't agree with it, I had a good time overall. Don't get excited. I think I'm leaning to like a 3-star. I think it's a 2 or a 3. Let's call it a 3. Let's give Jason Derulo the numbers that he wants. And let's all contribute to the success of this book so that he will write a second book, which is just a tell-all of cats. That is my hope. That is what I am manifesting from Jason Derulo. Alright, thank you so much for joining me. If you're interested in other bookish content, subscribe, and I will be back very soon with another video. Bye!